Well, Beatriz, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about your story and your journey with SHIP. Can you briefly introduce yourself for those of us who don't know you very well yet?
Thanks, Alex, for having me. My name is Beatriz Garcia, and I am a former employee of SHIP. I was with the organization full time for about 8 years, from 2000, oh my goodness, 2008 to 2016. And before that, I actually was a student member who was active, who was part of the board as a student leader for 2 years as a director of communications and then a vice president. And in my vice presidency year, just because I just, felt I didn't have enough to do being a full-time student and a vice president of a chapter, I decided I'd be a co-chair for one of the regional conferences. And so my experience feels really grounded and rooted in the mission of the
Mm,
organization, having started off as a student. And then I really kind of say that I grew up with the organization during a lot of formative years of not just my personal life, but also like my professional life, coming in as a young professional into the organization,
mhm.
right out of college as an assistant, eager and ready to learn all things, and then quickly rising into management a year after I graduated, becoming a manager for the organization. I was the events manager, overseeing the conferences, everything that you would consider an event for SHIP, I was responsible for, along with the team eventually that ended up creating at the organization. And then I left as a director the organization into transitioning into the next part of my career, but really just, that's my brief history with the organization.
Wow. So many places for us to go. I want to just rewind as far as we can and set the stage a little bit for this journey. Tell me about where did you grow up and when did you first start to realize that you were interested in STEM?
So I grew up in Los Angeles. I'm born and raised in Los Angeles. And funny thing or interesting thing, I am not a STEM, I guess, someone who got a degree in STEM. I've always loved STEM. I've always enjoyed what science, technology, engineering, and math does for people and like all the things. But that's not the path I chose. And so I think that makes my story a little bit more unique in which
Yeah.
that I am a non-STEM person in regards to like professionally speaking. But when I was in college, the majority of my cousins, we were in the same university and they're all engineering degree. Um, and so as a lonely freshman, obviously I didn't have any friends. I didn't know anybody on campus and they were very involved in SHIP. And I went for the meeting and the free pizza, as everybody always, we know the pizza works.
I was
And
keeping track at the convention. It was either pizza or tacos every time. I think pizza's pulled
uh-huh,
ahead.
yeah, pizza was what they used. And I went to a meeting because my cousins were there and we were gonna hang out and I didn't want to do anything. Like I didn't know what to do during my off time right now, like, during my first year. And I just never left. I
Yeah.
never left. I loved the community that SHIP presented and what it stood for as, like, a non-STEM part, like,
Mhm.
degree. I actually ended up graduating with a business degree from Cal State Northridge, but that is how I got started with the organization, just simply was immersed in the mission and, like, what the organization stood for.
Well, I apologize for my assumptions. I have been I've talked to so many
Yeah, I
SHIP
know.
members that I think that's almost a reflex of my first question at this point. So I apologize for assuming things about you. And so you were dragged into SHIP by your friends so that you could have some community and everything. What was what was the feeling for you joining the SHIP community at the beginning, knowing that you weren't an engineer and I assume everyone else,
Mhm.
figures that out fairly quickly as well. What was the reception that you had?
It was overwhelmingly positive. I think having a STEM degree or being someone in STEM, like, and kinda, like, witnessing and observing all the challenges and obstacles all my friends went through was really admirable in a way of just, like, the the need for community, the need for the sharing of resources with each other, the way that we'd come together into this, we had a study room, right, the MEP study room, and just, right, coming from our backgrounds as, like, Latinx people, Latin people, it's like we're very culturally grown up in being in like groups, right? Family, community,
Mm,
it's like what we know. And so to not have that at a university, if you're studying something that's very challenging and difficult, it's really nice to see how SHIP provides that for people and how I was just very welcomed because, well, I think also it helped that I was like cousins with, my
sure.
cousins were
You have
it,
an
but
in.
I had an in. But I think the president at the time, actually, Ari Soto, he saw me and he's like, I need you to get involved, right, as a
Mm,
freshman. And I was like, sure, I will get involved. And so I think that's the first year that I joined the banquet committee, right? The end of the year banquet committee for the graduating class. And I just loved it. There was like a spark of like community service that it was opened up in me. And so I'm like, oh, I can do
mm,
this. Definitely do this. And because it was just easy to do things or not do things, but like easy to commit myself and be dedicated to something that I believed in. I think that was the easiest thing is I believe there's a part of me that had wished that I'd been more encouraged, right? I kind of have like math anxiety.
mhm.
Um, that I'd been encouraged to pursue maybe a STEM degree because I've always been fascinated by it, even to this day. But as typical things happen as a young girl in school, it just fell into place that I was not encouraged.
Mhm.
And I developed my own kind of like anxiety around it. But yeah, but I feel like I've always felt welcomed. And actually, a funny story is during my time at school, during my time at SHIP at Cal State Northridge, I was so much like I spent so much time at the engineering building. I knew all the codes. I knew all the ins and outs of that building. And it was to the point that the director of the MEP office thought I was an engineering student and asked me why I have not seen her yet to get ready for graduation.
Oh my gosh.
Because I am not an engineering student.
I'm seeing my advisor.
Yes, yes. But because, again, I was so involved, I actually was invited to the MEP luncheon and was given an honorary medal for being who I was with supporting STEM degree students. And so that was actually a really special award that I still kind of
Yeah.
really hold close to my heart because it meant a lot to me to be recognized for the love that I had for everybody in that building and everybody doing what they were doing.
That's so wonderful. I actually really love, that part of the story too, because I really relate to that. I myself am not a STEM member. I have just recently gotten involved with SHIP in a professional capacity, not a STEM student myself, but from the moment I was able to, be at my first conference last year and then, again this year, I know what you mean. It's a very welcoming community and there's a very contagious spirit, I think, particularly at the conferences, which we're gonna talk more about because I know that you have a lot to do with that. But yeah, I totally know what you mean because I feel like I'm someone I've been interested in STEM, but having undiagnosed ADHD when I was in college, I was just trying to get out of school as fast as possible, and any sort of STEM career was like, that's not gonna be the way
Well,
that I accomplish that. I took multiple years longer than I should have for my business degree, so so the STEM degree was not on the table for me, but it's been great to me to be able to find SHIP at this stage of my life because I now have children, one of which who has already expressed he wants to be an engineer. He's 6 years old. And so now I'm like, I know what to do with you, when we get to those stages because I know people now and I know the impact that organizations like this can have. And so I think that's such a beautiful part of your story. And one of the things I think that it highlights about SHIP in particular is I think SHIP on every level really is really good at recognizing and including the people who can push the mission forward. You talk about you came in for free pizza like so many people and weren't even a STEM student, not an engineering student, despite what some of the professors might have thought. And the SHIP chapter president recognized you needed to be involved and, having had a preview of your story already, we know that that led to a lot of involvement down the line. And so I think that really speaks to him being able to spot that in you and not only like see that, but reach out, encourage you and prop you up for that. And so I think that again, I see that play out in different levels of SHIP in different every area. I think that's something that SHIP does really well. And this is just a great example of that.
No, thank you for highlighting that because as well, I've seen that happen again and again and again, and it's what makes SHIP such a beautiful organization community to be a part of is that encouragement, it's those opportunities, it's the like the fruitful soil, right, for something to grow in, right? Like you're
Yes.
cool. I feel like that's really what because they did. Like I really like I think I mentioned earlier, like I feel like I really did grow up with this organization in many ways.
And so I want to then can you remind me where you went to school? I know you said it, but I've thought about other things since then.
I attended Cal State Northridge.
So at Cal State Northridge, you're studying business. What was there any part of your journey in school that felt very relatable to some of the ship members? Being a Latina in a business school, we talk a lot about what it's like for the Hispanic students, particularly Latinas, in the engineering courses. Were there commonalities between their stories and yours that you could then find more importance in your community with them?
Absolutely. Well, because I'm a daughter of immigrants and I'm first generation. Although my cousins had right, like I had cousins not in my immediate family, but extended family that did pursue degrees in engineering. And a lot of the women in my family also pursued degrees more in, like, education,
Hmm.
in the liberal arts. I was the first kind of doing something different, pursuing a business degree, which is not engineering, but it's also not liberal arts. There's a little
Right.
bit more of I mean, you know this, you know what it goes into it.
Yeah.
Accounts, goodness, statistics, like, oh god. Um,
I took both those classes twice, so it's okay.
yeah, same. I mean, accounting 1, I had to retake because oh, I could not pass it. So there was a level of resonance of their
Mm,
experience, my own, being in the business building, and as diverse as Cal State Northridge was, I still sometimes often found myself being the only Latina in the classes, which was great because the business College of Business also had, like, a ship, right, but for Latino business, right? So it's called Latino
mm,
Business Association, which I was a part of and involved, but not as involved as ship. I don't know, my heart just always belonged to ship.
yeah.
Um, but it was seeing what my fellowship members were going through and how they would share resources and how they would study actually helped me do the same thing in the College of Business. I
Mm,
started adapting their strategies of finding people I can connect with, community, so that I wouldn't have to do it alone. Right. Because it like we were talking about, like some of the classes are really difficult and challenging to pass, and they require a minimum level of getting a grade so that you could move on and move forward. And being the first in my immediate family to go, navigating being the first to earn a business degree within my whole family, it was helpful to be among others that just understood it and got it. Especially having to help my parents understand why I couldn't go over to the house, why I was on campus really late at night, why I had to prioritize some things over family. It was really helpful to also know that my other fellow students, ship members were going through the same thing and having those similar conversations with their family members too.
yeah. And I think again that really speaks to the impact that the mission of the organization really has. SHIP is fairly specific in that they're looking to support Hispanics in STEM, we which both of those are actually very broad topics or very broad categories. The definition of Hispanic is huge. We saw that represented at in Salt Lake City at convention, and the definition of an engineer is also huge. There's a huge range of engineers that were represented there as well that we spoke to and had on this podcast. And so I think even though that doesn't specifically target someone like you in particular, the mission is carried out so successfully and impactfully that there's this like spillover, right? And I think that's kind of what you got caught up in, for lack of a better term. And I think that's again that speaks to just the success of the mission and of the values of the organization. And so before we start to finally get more into your story a little bit, I if you could put obviously there's a lot of intangible qualities to this, it seems, but if you could try to like put a finger on like what was it about ship that got you coming back versus another organization? And not saying that the other organization that was meant for business students was poor in any sort of way, but what was the special connection that you had with SHIP, and where do you think that came from?
My connection came because my cousins were involved.
Hmm.
And I love my cousins dearly, and they were my first friends in life. And so the fact that we were going through college together and I was sharing that experience with them, and then this added benefit of having to getting to share this mission-driven work with them also, this volunteer-based work and this leadership development work together was just awesome because
Yeah.
when I was director of communications, my cousin was on the board. My cousin Victor Cervantes was on the board. And then I think my cousin Amado Galaviz, who they're both still very highly involved with the organization, by the way. He was vice president, I think, also when I was a freshman, when I was just a member. And so seeing them do what they did for the organization, for the chapter, and then kind of wanting to follow in their footsteps and then be encouraged and then finding out that I'm really good at it, that I really
Mhm.
love it, that I'm just oh yeah, this is great. So I think that's what kept me coming on top of the mission, on top of the people I was
Mm.
friends that I was making and the experiences that I was having. To me, it was about this connection with my family. Absolutely.
Yeah, it all comes down to that familia that is talked about
Exactly.
so
I had
much
it
in SHIP.
real. I had ship familia, then I had real Garcia
Y
familia.
you had your familia that got you in, and then it just expanded.
Exactly.
So wonderful. So then talk to me about your growth within SHIP. So you continue to pursue different leadership opportunities. What led to those, next steps after you were able to leave college?
Yeah. Well, I am very grateful because being a student, being in business, I was okay, I have to start thinking about what business jobs I want. Oh my God, right? Kind of getting ready for that. But after co-chairing the regional leadership conference, I worked really closely with Wendy Jaro, who was the RSR at the time. And she was really because the national office was in Los Angeles, she was there often, right? To kind of pick up things, talk to the staff, do things. And at one point with the executive director at the time, they had asked oh, I think they were thinking and wondering about hiring an intern. And Wendy was I have the perfect person for you.
Mm.
I just worked with her and she would be absolutely fantastic. And Wendy's the one that encouraged me to pursue this internship opportunity with the national office. I had not even thought about it. I was I survived this conference. It took a lot out of me, right? Shout out to all previous and current regional conference chairs. It's a lot of work, but it's very rewarding. It's a lot of work. And so I went in for an interview. I was you know what? Let me entertain this. I wonder what it would be like. I love SHIP already. I wonder what it would look like to be an intern.
Mhm.
And I was being interviewed by the executive director and the events manager at the time. And I was hired almost on the spot. I was
I love how
oh,
you're still shocked by this.
I am. So I'm just oh, that really happened. And I was oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Yes, I will be the intern, the events intern. And I learned so much
Mm.
that I feel I had a trial by fire leading and running and organizing the regional conference. But I think having a kind of backstage or behind the scenes understanding at a national level was completely different. I was amazed as what went into putting together a conference at the time. And mind you, they were a lot smaller than what they've grown into be, but it still took a lot of energy and resources. And so that was a pivotal point because then I came back another year. I was yeah, I
Mm.
want to be an intern again. Right.
Mhm.
Right. Because I just, yeah, but so I had 2 internships. And then I finished, I was I have to finish school. I have to finish school. So I have to I had to focus and concentrate. So I didn't come back. But then at the time, Diana Gomez was the president and we had become close and she became a mentor of mine. And I had asked her because I was starting to interview, I was graduating. I was I have to get myself a job. And mind you, this is in 2008, which was not the best year to graduate. Many of
Sure.
you know, right? It was really hard and competitive. And I had asked her if she could be a reference for me. And she's why are you interviewing in other places? And I was what do you mean? And she said, why are you interviewing other places? Come work for SHIP. And I said,
Mm.
on your website, there are no job openings, right? Like, I would love to work there, but unfortunately, you're not hiring. And she said, let's see what I can do. And then I think a few weeks later, she came back. Mind you, I was still interviewing. I was still kind of going through the process. And she came back. She said, we have a position for you. Come in to interview for it. And I was like, are you
That sounds
serious?
suspiciously like she made something for you. I'm
Well,
just gonna
I did
say
not confirm or deny. I just was invited to be interviewed.
it sounds like something Deanna would do. She hasn't told me this. I'm just pure speculation. I'm just saying.
I love Diana. Thank you, Diana. And I went in and I interviewed. Again, I mean, I already knew the director or the events manager because I had worked with him. So it was like an easy interview, which is more like a formality of things.
Mhm.
And yeah, and then I started working as an assistant to the department. At that point, there was 2 events team members. And then that started my full-time employee journey as an assistant. That in that year, I think the conference was in Phoenix. That was my first conference as a full-time employee.
I also want to briefly shout out again to Wendy Haro, who was I had the opportunity to interview
Oh, great.
in
Yeah.
Salt Lake City. So again, sounds perfectly in her character. I'm not at all surprised by that. She is also fantastic. Again, I just love the way that your story is so representative of ship's culture. Deanna's you going to Deanna for advice. Oh, what should I do? How should I attack this problem of looking for a job and interviewing? Not a great time to be graduating, yada yada yada. And she goes, very respectfully, I assume, what are you doing?
Yes.
I can help you with this problem. And that's I can also very much picture her saying that too. So I absolutely love that part of the story. Uh, Again, it just speaks to who Ship is as a familia, and it's it's not just the like we look out for our own. Obviously, there's so much of that, but it's the we invest in our people, and part of that is Deanna at some point in your guys' relationship showing you that you can come to me for all this. I want you to come to me. And that's one of the things I picked up on with Ship. It's not just you can come talk to me. I can be a mentor for you. I want you to come to me because I want to continue to feed the pipeline of Hispanics in STEM or Hispanics in business in this case. And there's so much that comes from that culture of this free flowing dialogue between mentors, mentees, members at different levels of their careers in the organization. And it just, I've seen example after example of how beneficial that is to not only the organization, but the members themselves on an individual level.
It is. It absolutely is. And, it's the people that you meet, the friends that you make, the experiences you go through together that just really keep you there. Like, I mean, there's so many people that along my journey, I've only named a few of them. There's just so many people that have been pivotal to
Yeah.
my career, just kind of helped me along and to grow and develop as like the professional that I am today.
So I want to talk briefly about at the time of recording this, I just got home from Salt Lake City where we had
Mhm.
the biggest national convention to date. The number
I
I've
love
heard
it.
was 12,500 plus. And everyone expects next year to be even bigger. And so I want to talk about this is such an amazing event. It's the convention last year is what made me fall in love fully with the organization. And so being someone who's been involved in planning ship events, can you talk to us a little bit about what goes into that? Because we know because it's clear that there's a lot of work that goes into this and can pull the curtains back for us a little bit. What is some of the stuff that we wouldn't know about how much work goes into all of these events? Not just convention either, but all of the regional conferences and everything on every level.
That's a really, really great question. And the first thing that came to my mind is all the volunteers.
Mhm.
Every single ship member who volunteers and raises their hand and says yes to the beautiful madness that is planning and coordinating and executing any event at a regional level to the national level is what makes it happen. I, at the point, when I was a full-time staff member, there was only 10 SHPE staff members.
Mhm.
10. Our national office was ran by 10 people. And we were responsible, right? The events department at that point, I think I had 2 full-time employees, 2 coordinators, and we were responsible for over 25 events in a year, in a calendar year. This included
Wow.
meetings, IPC meetings, NELA, regional conferences, like any plan, like anything that needed to be organized and planned, like we were doing it. But we would not be able to do it with 3 people, you
Mhm.
know? So the magic to me are the volunteers, are the committee members that year after year after year sign up. Like, holy, like I still love that they do this. And seeing the photos from this last year, because unfortunately I wasn't there, it's like seeing them again, I was like, oh my God, it brings back so many beautiful memories that I've shared with them. Because I was with the organization for 10 years as like an employee, including my internships. And they're still around. They're still doing it year after year. And so it requires them. Without them, I mean, I don't know the structure right now for the staff, but it requires the heart
Mhm.
and grit of the volunteer committees. But internally, a little bit what goes into like the planning is, at least when I was there and I was overseeing the team, we were always talking in multiple years. We were always talking about like
Mhm.
3 years out, 4 years out, and just, like, having to have a plan already. Like, yes, I was in the present moment planning this year to be a great, but I was already, like, 2, 3 years ahead. Like, where are we going? Who do we want involved? What are we growing into? And so there's a lot of intentionality behind creating the experience that is the the SHPE convention. And there's a lot of conversations and there's a lot of partnership also that goes internally with all the teams, especially the fund development team, thinking about what sponsors we can connect with, what are the highlights and things we wanna, like, really showcase of the city, like, how can we truly become a partner with the city that's bringing us in there, and also with, like, the lead sponsors. It's multifaceted, it's so many pieces, and I loved it. I loved doing it. It was a really great part of my career.
And to affirm some of what you said too, I asked people have been involved in planning stuff more recently, and they've also said the same thing. They can't do anything without the volunteers. And so, regardless of how the structure of SHIP has changed since you've been here, I know that to still be true. And I know that, especially as they're doing things on bigger scales and levels, I can't imagine the value of that even to this day. So, absolutely, shout out to everyone who signs up. Don't stop. Encourage more people to do it because you guys are moving the organization forward. So, being able to be on staff then for 10 years plus your time involved as a member, you've gotten to see a big part of SHIP's growth over the years. And we're here celebrating 50 years of SHIP. And so you've already alluded to a lot of this, talking about how starting with 10 staff members, three staff members planning events, you know, back in the day. And obviously lots of that has changed. But what are some other ways that you've seen SHIP grow during your time with the organization?
Absolutely. Well, when I was an intern, that first internship that I had, I was interviewed by the executive director, right? Like when I
Mhm.
started the SHIP, it was under a traditional nonprofit structure with an executive director, Eileen Chambers. And when I came to be that interview for that full-time assistant position with the events department, the organization already had shifted to a CEO model. And at that point, they had a CEO on loan from IBM. Enrique Gomez, I believe was his name. And so I feel like I have seen the organization at some very pivotal points leading it up to where it is now. And then and at that point also a lot of the committees, the conventions, NELA were staff. I mean, were volunteer led. And 2009 was volunteer ran, and which was I think DC. So 2008 Phoenix, 2009 DC, 2010 still Cincinnati was a little bit more like at that point we had hired some consultants to help with like the management of the convention to kind of get it to a level where we were headed. And by 2011 was the first year that the convention was staff led. I became the chair of the conference. Before then, we always had volunteer members being the chair and the co-chair. But that year, 2011, was the first year that I became the chair and restructured the committees in a different way and kind of really started to shift. I want to see the word that comes with like a level of burden off the volunteer committees, because
Mm,
again, they're with full-time jobs. Like, this is
right.
what I do for a living. So we started searching more like that they were still having responsibility and oversight over many important things, but a lot of like the logistics, the small details, the contract, like a lot of that stuff became more internal and more in-house. And then it just kind of like developed from there. But 2011 was that turning point that we kind of really shifted to more staff-led
Mm.
initiatives. And at that point, we had our CEOs in place, and so like really kind of like starting to see the changes of things. But yeah, it's been really and having it grow. So when I started in 2008 was my first conference. Phoenix had 3,500 attendees. And by the time I left in 2016, which I believe was Seattle, I think we had gone over 7,000 members. So during my
Wow.
time, we were also able to more than double it. And now hearing the numbers now, it's like, yes, it's going to just continue to grow because
Yeah.
it's a force to be reckoned with, this organization and what it stands for.
Absolutely. I want to ask a little bit about, we talked about the importance of volunteers, particularly in being involved in these events. When you make the shift to, I like the way you phrase that, of taking some of the burden off of the volunteers to have that be more, some of that stuff be more staff directed and led. What was the change of the volunteers' roles at that point in time? Because to assume something about this, knowing what I know about SHIP, the volunteers didn't stop being involved. How did their involvement change?
Let me see. It was so they were responsible. This I was very impressed, right? Talk about commitment. The volunteers were responsible for negotiating contracts, finding vendors, like all the nitty-gritty things that an event manager, event planner should be doing. And again, it's because there was a need. SHIP was a grassroots organization that started with volunteers, grew with volunteers at the helm, and has been an important component of it, but its staff development, its staff structure was always just kind of a little rocky, and it started to solidify during the years that I was there. And so part of that was really bringing in-house a lot of those more management and oversight components of, well, at least what I was responsible for in my department. And so that's kind of like what the burden that I was on was like, you let us
Mhm.
negotiate that. Let us renegotiate those payment terms. Like, just like organize the things that we needed to organize and have oversight over, and then have you focus on the content, on the experience you wanted to create for the members, on what were the important conversations that needed to be had, what were the important decisions that we need to make as a committee. So that kind of was the biggest change and shift.
Hmm. And so then talk to me about, since your time after leaving your time oh, we'll try all that again. I'm trying to say too many things at once. So since you've left SHIP, what has your involvement been? Because obviously you haven't fully escaped. I'm here talking to you right now.
Yes, it has been a bit limited. I left because I was in grad school and managing, as I shared earlier, 25 events at a minimum
Mhm.
a year,
Yeah.
time job with a full-time program. It was time for me to kind of prioritize my master's program. And so it was a very difficult and challenging
Mhm.
to make. Because as you can still tell, I still love the organization. I love everything about it. But it was just at a point in my life that I was like, okay, I need to do this for myself. And so like I will actually, and well, my support is, or my connection still is, that I'm a lifetime member. I'm still a
Mhm.
lifetime member. I became one in 2012 thanks to Barry Cordero, Wendy Jarro, and Mike Cruz. They actually
Mhm.
sponsored me to become a lifetime member. And so my connection is still there. I still receive the newsletters. My cousin Amado was the president of the SHPE LA chapter, and so I like supported him in the ways that I can. But I have kind of have been on a hiatus of sorts. Like, and we always joke with a lot of my fellowship friends and everything. It's like, yeah, everybody takes a hiatus just because life happens, and then you come back, but you're never really gone.
Right.
You're never really gone. And so that's how I feel like the last few years have been for me. It's like I've been focused a little bit more about like things in my life, things I've been
Sure.
wanting to work on and develop. But I'm around. I'm still here. I still talk to, hang out, and see people from SHIP.
And so talking about the past 50 years of SHIP and the history and the growth has been really exciting. I've had a lot of great opportunities to hear different stories about that journey for the organization and for the members that it's impacted. But I want to ask you now, if we look forward the next 50 years of SHIP, what are some things you're excited on, whether from the trajectory of the organization from when you were there and or from the connections that you've had now and what you know about the organization? What are some things that get you excited about SHIP's next 50 years?
Ooh. I feel like what I'm excited most about is like the tipping point for the organization at like a
Hmm.
national level where it is something people have heard about. It is an organization that people know and recognized and is seen as a thought leader, a forerunner in this conversation around STEM excellence within the Hispanic community. And it's not that to say that it's not happening now, but I feel like it's gonna be like, "Oh, yeah, we know SHIP." It's just as simple as you would say, like, any organization at that level.
Sure.
Oh, I feel like that's where it's headed, that's where it's going, and to know that it can and has been changing the experience and stories of so many people across the nation, and I'm just curious, I wonder what it will scale to. So I'm really excited to see its growth and see its impact.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that while maybe on hiatus, you are not gone and you will definitely be around to see all of that. I want to just briefly before I let you go, since your time at SHIP, and you've completed your master's program, is that right? And what are you
Yes.
doing now?
I actually own my own business, a DEI agency, so diversity, equity, and inclusion agency, Your Truth at Work. And we work with organizations who are wanting to move beyond performative DEI statements, DEI like initiatives and programs. And so like we really get deep into the work and are focused on the people doing DEI work and also offering like services and programs to individuals healing from toxic workplaces
Hmm.
because you know, it happens. And so that's
She's
what
not
I'm
talking about SHIP, right?
no, 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 no. No, absolutely not.
Felt it was worth it to clarify, just
Yeah, no.
saying.
From
Yeah.
many people from many industries. But yes.
So tell me a little bit about I want to hear a little bit more about your services for people healing from toxic work environments because I think especially over the past few years after 2020 and COVID, work environments have changed greatly. How has that in particular impacted what you do and the services that you offer individuals?
Yeah. I appreciate that question. At the core of what we do is really center the identities of the people that we work with. I think
Mm,
oftentimes in workplaces, we're asked to fit in. We're asked to an extent, to assimilate to the values, to the culture of the workplace without consideration of who we are as individuals.
mm,
And our work focuses on your identities, right? Like specifically my identity that I shared earlier. I'm like a first gen daughter of immigrants. And so like what does that mean for me to show up at work in my authentic self? What does it look like for me to show up like, for example, like my during my time at SHIP, I greatly suffered from this idea of imposter syndrome because I was so young in my career and I was doing so much, but there was no language to talk about it. I didn't know who to ask questions about what was going on or what I was experiencing as like a young professional. And so our services create that space and invite that dialogue in that conversation and to kind of really heal and for people to gain more of themselves to be able to
mm.
do the things that they wanna do at work.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that, sharing about your story, and thank you for serving SHIP for so many years. I feel very comfortable speaking for the SHIP family in this moment, saying thank you for your wonderful service. I know that a big part of where SHIP is and where SHIP is going is a part of people like you in particular who have just been bought into the mission and hurdled it forward. So thank you so much, and I really appreciate spending the time with you today.
Thank you, Alex. I really truly appreciate that. And it truly has been a privilege and an honor to have been part of the history of SHIP. So thank you again for inviting me and having me here today.
Absolutely, all of our pleasure. Thank you.